Hello there, and welcome to the stream. It is Wednesday, January 11th, and it's 10 minutes past 6 p.m. my time, my local time. Get the fireplace on, so it's time for another fireside chat, aka it's time to podcast. I'm going to record another audio show for my listeners in case you've never listen to the podcast and you'd be interested, go to or search for The Break with Father Roderick, wherever you get your podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about Deep Space Nine, about the life of astronauts. I'll talk a little bit about alternatives for staple food items like dairy and meat, and how supermarkets are sometimes subtly nudging you without you even realizing it to make healthier choices or more sustainable choices. So we'll talk about that. I'll review some of the books that I've read this past week. Already at 4 books in the new year, on my way to 150 books for 2023. And we'll talk about technology, video games, and much, much more as usual. So make sure to introduce yourself in the chat room. I'll be able to read all the comments, whether you are commenting on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitch. If I'm correct, all that is going to be siphoned into the comments section on my streaming software. Hey, Michiel is there as well from the UK. And he hasn't finished his first book yet. Well, you've had a pretty busy couple of weeks, so take it easy. 2023 is still very long. It's going to be quite a year. Oh my gosh, going to be the year of another Star Wars celebration. Going to London around Easter. And that's going to be the first time for me to go to London. So I'm really looking forward to discovering that city, even though I'm not sure if I'll have much time to discover London itself, since it's all going to be Star Wars related, what I'm doing there. Hey, Martijn. And I'll be traveling for my vacation to Brittany, to France. That's also been booked yesterday. So we're going to be in the northwestern part of Brittany. So that's an interesting region. I hope that we have a lock on the cottage that we're going to rent, since it's close to the sea. It's a very nice nice location. I think it's a 4-kilometer walk to the coast, and seeing that the previous couple of years it's been very hot during the summertime, I don't think it's going to be a mistake to be close to the water when temperatures will rise. And hey, Michael, good to see you. I'll also most likely return to the United States. I've been in touch with Rob Cabasco. As you recall, last year I was a guest of his family, and together we went to the Star Wars celebration in Anaheim, and we made all sorts of world domination plans. It's time to start putting all those things in motion this year. So I'm hopefully also returning to the West Coast area, or the western part of the United States. And I'd like to make some other trips for filming. Most notably, I'd love to return to Scotland and England for a series about the great stories that connect us all, from Harry Potter to Tolkien to Star Wars. It's, I think, important to stress how much we need stories, both old and new, to come together and to find common values and common ground in a world that is so polarized and divided right now. So I'm currently in this, during this winter break that I'm on, I'm doing a lot of thinking about, what's going to be the angle. Why do I want this? What kind of story do I want to tell? And how can I illustrate that? because the stories are already there, and but it's going to be a challenge to make a series that is, I don't know, it's interesting to watch and is surprising and adventurous, and at the same time also really would like it to have some depth and a message for our world. Hey, Douglas, how is life in Brazil? You've had some very turbulent times there. Oh my gosh, I've been following the news. I'm glad things are calming down a little bit, but man, I have not heard about I've heard about the Avatar game, but I haven't played it. I can't play it because it's not out yet. But I haven't read anything about the gameplay. That's what I wanted to say. So I hope it's going to be good. I saw, however, but maybe you're talking about the other Avatar. So not the films with the blue guys, but Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I saw some footage this morning, and it looked good. It's like a bit of an RPG type of game. Very cool. The audio devices, why is this Audition thing constantly bugging me? Maybe I'll just turn it off. I just edited The Walk, this week's episode of The Walk. Well, let me first export this episode before the computer crashes. I've got a frog in my throat. I don't know why. So I was in the middle of editing The Walk, and then I got distracted as usual. And so I didn't finish the job. So let me do that right now. 128 kbps. And then let's browse to the folder on my Google Drive, which is here. And we're going to select 2023, week 2 already. Time flies. And then save. And then OK. And now it's saving the podcast, and then I have to do the tagging and uploading, posting it to the website and to Patreon, and then people can download it. But I have an appointment later tonight. In about an hour, I'll have to go. Probably a little less than an hour. I have to step on my bike and join Father Henry for his last official dinner. So the parish council invited us all to say goodbye to Father Henry, who moved today, or at least his stuff moved out today, and he will be moving tomorrow, I think. And so this is the last get together with him. Talked a little bit about his farewell mass on Sunday, because he had a really nice homily, and it helped me in a very specific way. I talk about that in this week's episode of The Walk, if you're interested. But let's waste no more time. And since I'm now done with Adobe Audition, I can close that program and press record on my Rodecaster. The Rodecaster. Here we go. Hey everyone, it's week 2 of the year 2023, and you're listening to The Break with Father Roderick, recording this on a Wednesday evening, and it is, I've got exactly 1 hour to get this show done, because then I have to join Father Henry for his last dinner with the parish council, because he's leaving tomorrow. This episode of The Break is brought to you thanks to my patrons, a wonderful community of people that support me with their monthly micro donations. And I am super happy that I can welcome a couple of new patrons. And since the beginning of this year, including the last day of the last year of 2022, I want to welcome Lawrence Judy, who joined us as a patron on the $5 level. I want to thank Johan Pakla for editing his pledge. He's upping his pledge. He's a big sponsor, a big donor and helper of my mission. I'm really thankful for all his support. I want to thank Joost and Dominique for upping their pledge. I would love to welcome Peter Kuiper as a new patron, and also Scott Shields, who also joined the Patreon community. Now, if you want to get access to the Discord server and meet all these new people and old people and want to hang out with me and chat, and help me with my mission to reach out to, well, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people on these various different social platforms, then take a look at patreon.com/Father Roderick.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
So a lot of things happening in the larger world and in the small world that constitutes my own environment. As I mentioned in the intro, Father Henry is leaving the parish. He has been appointed in a new parish in Apeldoorn. And so he moved out earlier this morning, and tonight he will have his farewell dinner. I was at his farewell mass this past Sunday, and Father Henry and I, we have the same age. We were in seminary together for 5 years, I think. We studied together in Rome, and so we know each other very well. I'm very happy for him that he has a wonderful new parish. Of course, I'm also a bit sad to see him go, because we often chatted, and every once in a while, he'd pop in, or I would go over there and we would eat together. And Father Henry is the total opposite of me in terms of social engagement. He loves to be among people, and so there's always something to do there. He loves to invite people to come over and cook with him, and so many times I've benefited from his hospitality. So yeah, I'm sad to see him go. On the other hand, I'm glad for him. It is, I think, a very good parish, slightly calmer, at least the number of communities that he has to shepherd is a bit smaller, so I hope for him that he gets a little bit more time for himself, read a book from time to time, or just go for a walk instead of constantly, working. And I'm super happy that we get a very good replacement. Father Mauricio, who is from Colombia originally, he's a missionary. He works in the Netherlands, and I worked together with him in Amersfoort for a couple of years. He's a very dynamic guy. I think multi-talented, and also a very cheerful guy. Good sense of humor, and always full of ideas and energy. So really happy to see him coming to this parish and leading us. In the larger world, also, of course, lots of stuff happening. Last week was the funeral of Pope Benedict. And so I've been following that online. Unfortunately, I was not in Rome at the time, but we do have a lot of people there that did, I think, a terrific job keeping us informed about what was going on there. And then this morning, I read the news that Cardinal Pell, the former Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Sydney, had passed away due to complications after a hip surgery. He was, I think, 80 or 81 years old, and of course, very well known from the work that he did in Sydney. He hosted the World Youth Days there in Australia. And then, of course, afterwards, the accusations that initially landed him in jail of two young men that said that he had abused them, which ultimately he was completely acquitted from. After how do you say that? An appeal, and so even though he was acquitted, the media still associate him very much with that. All the abuse crisis in the church, and he was back in Rome. So after he was freed from prison, or let go from prison, he went back to Rome before he went to Australia to defend himself. He, of course, led the charge in the reformation of the whole financial system of the Vatican, and uncovered a lot of stuff that was wrong, and started to implement a lot of changes, which, as you can imagine, didn't make him very popular with some people that benefited from the old way of doing things. But Pope Francis has many times said that if it hadn't been for Pell, a lot of the changes would not have occurred. So I think he has been extremely important for the renewal, and in certain ways also the purging of a lot of the old broken systems when it comes to the Vatican finances. And so the complications after his surgery had been planned for a long time. In fact, he had concelebrated during the funeral of Pope Benedict, and the surgery itself is nothing too special. I mean, it's a procedure that is done many times every day in all over the world. But he had some heart problems, and apparently unforeseen complications led to his heart stopping. And then this morning, the news that he had passed away. I'm sure that people that have known him personally very well, that have worked with him, that also knew that he was innocent or were convinced of his innocence, must feel very sad. I guess it's probably also going to be in the media, another occasion for people to to be upset with the way in which the church has handled abuse in the church, and according to some continues to cover up cases of abuse. So yeah, there's probably also going to be it's going to trigger some anger and negativity. I've met him once in my life. I made a trip to Australia for a conference about new media, and I started my journey in Sydney, and I stayed at the Episcopal Palace. So I was so Cardinal Pell at the time lived there. In the palace is not a conventional, old house or anything. It's a pretty big, modern building as far as I can remember, and it was created in such a way that there would be a lot of guest rooms for priests and visitors to be able to stay there. So that's how I got to stay a couple of days there, and I still remember the first day that I met him, which was so strange. I was up early because of the jet lag, and there's a huge time difference with the Netherlands. And I went down for breakfast to the hall that they indicated me the day before. And so, I don't know, I think I was eating some cereal, and all of a sudden, Cardinal Pell walks in. But he is still in his how do you say that? His robe. He was dressed, but he was like, he was walking on slippers, or what is it? How do you call these things that you wear in the house? Anyway, we'll just call them slippers. And he had his like a big dark blue or dark brown bathrobe that he was carrying, and he was very relaxed, and he just sat down and greeted me. And of course, he didn't know who I was, so I briefly introduced myself, and then he picked up the newspaper and he started to rant about some kind of rugby match that was played the day before, and so he was conversing with other priests about sports, and I was like, wow, this is the most low key bishop that I've ever seen. And then the next day, I had a formal and official interview with him, a podcast interview about World Youth Days and about the future of the church in Sydney, etc. This is a long time ago, so way before he went to Rome. But it was a very different style. I mean, there he was like the bishop, and he's a very tall guy, very imposing. I think he used to be actually a sportsman in his younger years. And then there was also his chief of communications who was there, and she was like, she wanted to screen all my questions, and it was a very formal situation. And I was like, okay, so this is the same guy that walked into the to the breakfast hall or breakfast room a day before in his bathrobe, and he was just chatting about rugby all morning long. It was very, very funny, but yeah, an imposing guy. Very strong character. I can imagine that it's not for everyone. I mean, he knew what he wanted. His successor is at a very different was a very different type of guy. So when Pell went to Rome, they appointed I think it's a Dominican priest, although I'm not entirely sure. And he used to be the auxiliary bishop under Pell, and the great organizer of those World Youth Days in Sydney, and a very, very kind man. I had met him. When was that? I met him when he was still the bishop of the neighboring diocese. So Anthony Fisher. Although I'm wondering if he had. Yeah, no, he was still. I remember. So when Cardinal Pell was still the Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher was the bishop of. Gosh, the name escapes me. Of it's the diocese next door, and so I got to meet him once or twice. Very calm, very nice guy. Extremely up to date when it comes to social communication and media, and I met him again in Spain during World Youth Days with Pope Benedict, and he still recognized me. I was like, "Oh, you're the podcasting priest," and so we had a conversation there, and then later on I heard that he had been appointed as the Archbishop of Sydney, and I think he's very well loved and also had a very calming effect, I think, on the diocese in the midst of all that turmoil surrounding the former Archbishop, Cardinal Pell, when he was convicted and everything. I think that the Diocese of Sydney had a very, very good, faithful shepherd in Anthony Fisher, who, of course, having worked as an auxiliary bishop for Pell many years, knew him very well. So I guess this is a sad day for many in the Archdiocese of Sydney. So yeah, so much things happening, and the year has barely begun. I was watching some videos from like Vatican watchers. So there is John Allen, who does a weekly video for Crux Now, and he started his YouTube video like, yeah, we all told each other, hey, it's the end of the year, beginning of the new year. That's usually a time where really nothing happens. Yeah, the Pope will give his blessing and do some stuff, but yeah, this is the perfect time to take a break. And so they all went on a break for 2 weeks, and then Pope Benedict dies and everything changes there. So he was scrambling to get back to work. And I think a lot of journalists and other people working in the Vatican must have felt like that. Like after Christmas, usually that's the time where priests and bishops are like, phew, well, we survived that. Let's take a break now. And then in the Vatican, no rest for the weary.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl, and that kid sees dead people, and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You know, you need a movie education. You need a movication. Now I'm gonna give it to you.
So as you know, I'm currently on a winter break, and I have a little bit more time to watch TV and catch up on some stuff. So I'm almost caught up with The Bad Batch, which is a Star Wars animated series. It's a lot of fun. I really like the storytelling, and the animation has only become better The Clone Wars, the final few seasons were already superb, and that Bad Batch is even more beautiful. It's incredible what they're pulling off, and of course, this is all leading us to more Star Wars series. We're going to get the Mandalorian back finally. Grogu will be back, and we will follow the Mandalorian on his quest to rehabilitate himself, maybe getting rid of that excommunication that he suffered last season. I can't wait to see that, and they have been sitting on that series for so long. When we were in Anaheim, they showed us a trailer and some stuff that afterwards they didn't post online, and it looked completely finished, special effects and all. So my thinking is they've had so much time perfecting this third season of The Mandalorian. It's going to blow us away. I can't wait to see more of it. But I've also dived back into the world of Star Trek. You know that I'm a little bit of I don't really tell my Star Wars friends this, but I'm actually also a Trekkie. I'm a very big Star Trek fan, and I was a Star Trek fan way before I was a Star Wars fan. This has to do with one of my first international television experiences. When I was a young boy, like 4 or 5 years old, we always, I've told this story before, so my apologies if you've already heard this, but my grandparents the parents of my father lived in the south of the country, where this little appendix almost of the Netherlands, very close to the Belgian border and the border with Germany, which means back in the days, cable television didn't exist. So you were dependent on what your receiver, your antenna could pick up. And I lived near Rotterdam. So we only had Dutch TV, and it was, I think, one channel or one or two channels. Whereas if we went to stay with our grandparents, that antenna could pick up the Belgian television channels over the air and also the German ones. Now, the German television had a dubbed series of Star Trek that they ran in the afternoons. And once I discovered that, we would watch that religiously. I couldn't wait to turn it on. I think it was on several times a week. And it was dubbed in German. And of course, as a child, didn't understand German. But I distinctly remember, it was a black and white TV at the time, Spock with his ears and then this spaceship. And back then I was already very, very much into anything that had to do with rockets and astronauts and spaceships and moon landings. And so seeing a television series about people in space, for me, it was the best television ever. And so Star Trek, the original series, had a major influence on me as a child. And maybe that's where my first steps into the world of eternal geekdom came from. I blame it on German television. Raumschiff Enterprise. And so I continue to love Star Trek up until this moment, and I really like where they are taking the franchise, especially with Strange New Worlds. I believe that they are rediscovering what made Star Trek so popular in the 60s and 70s, and that format, that formula, like every week it's a new journey, the alien of the week and stuff like that. The shenanigans on board of just a regular exploration ship. That's the kind of Star Trek formula that still works today. And there is one series that I still haven't seen or haven't finished, and that is Deep Space Nine, which, according to many Star Trek fans, is the best that has been ever written in Star Trek. It's of course older. It's, what is it, 20, 25 years old? Maybe even older. So it is a bit dated in terms of the way it looks, and it's clearly from the era. You know, they started filming this when The Next Generation was still on TV. So it has a bit of that same vibe. Even Worf, I think in the third season, starts to become a regular on the show. The difference with The Next Generation, of course, is Deep Space Nine takes place on a diplomatic spaceship maybe I'm confusing this with Babylon 5. But anyway, it's a stationary ship. So it's not a ship. It's a station, a space station. And it's a small society, and it had a much more of a sitcom vibe to it. It was all filmed always in the same sets. They barely ever visited planets. You didn't see much of space, so it felt in many ways much cheaper, simpler than the Next Generation. And this is probably also why initially I didn't care that much for Deep Space Nine. What I loved about Star Trek was the exploration, was the journeying, the traveling, the discovery. And Deep Space Nine just felt like every week kind of looked the same and had the same people and the same storylines. What years later, I started to discover why actually that is what makes the series so brilliant, because since they couldn't rely on the alien of the week or the beaming people down to all sorts of cheap looking planets, they had to do their best writing interesting storylines for their characters. And the further I get with the series, the better it becomes. And the more you start to love the people on board Deep Space Nine. And so yesterday evening, in fact, I watched 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine of the 4th season, I think episodes 13 and 14. And one was about Odo. Odo is an alien that can morph into anything, basically. Morph into inanimate objects and into people, and he can mimic others, and that is also why his species is sometimes very dangerous, because if they can use that morphing power for evil as well. And there have been some episodes where that happens, not with Odo, but definitely with other how do you say that? Other people. They're not really people, but other aliens from his species. But Odo is a bit, you could say, a bit akin to Data in a sense that he is always trying to figure out why humans are the way they are. He doesn't get human behavior. However, he does have emotions. It's not like Data, who has to get a special, new chip in order to experience emotions. Odo definitely has emotions, but in this particular episode, he actually falls in love with Kira, who's also one of the regular crew members. However, it's not mutual. And then someone else, like a big hotshot from another planet, visits the space station, and Kira is clearly infatuated with that guy. And then Odo is like the fifth wheel on the wagon. He is like, he would love to tell her what he feels for her, but he can't, because he's also responsible for security on board. And it is so well played and so subtle, and so you can see the heartbreak in this guy. And that's the Star Trek that I love so much. It's a simple love story about a love that is unanswered, and who can't relate to that? We've all been there, right? And then over time, during the episode, he of course chooses his duty. He knows that this is not going to go anywhere, and so he embraces his job. But it still hurts a bit to let go of that other potential dreamy future that maybe in an alternate universe would be a possibility, but not in this particular life. And of course, as a priest, I can also relate to that, because when I was still in high school, I was also infatuated from time to time, and I imagined myself being married to this or that girl and having a family. And then you make a different choice in life. You take a different at one junction. You choose to become a priest and to stay celibate and to not have a family. But sometimes you just wonder, what would my life be if I had turned right instead of left, and if I had done this or that. So I always like stories that kind of touch upon that almost nostalgia, that melancholy feeling like, have I made the right choice? Now, don't worry. I feel I feel like I have made the right choice, and I'm very happy as a priest. But there's still this little thing like, oh my gosh, well, what if I would have fallen in love and gotten married, and I'd be a dad now, maybe, or maybe not. Who knows? It's funny, and at the same time, life is all about not regretting the choices that you made, but to embrace your life as it is, and to try to find the value and the beauty in the life that you have, instead of just always longing for, a life that you wish you would have had. The grass on the neighbor's grass is always greener, but it's not your garden. It's not your life. So it's only going to make you unhappy if you keep resenting the life that you have, instead of looking for what makes your life as it is already of value. And it is of value. It is worthwhile. It is absolutely worth living, even though it's maybe not the life that you imagined to have or that you dreamed of having, but it's not over yet. So there's still so much potential in this life, in this situation. Just don't gloss over that by staying stuck in basically an impossible alternate reality. And I love that particular episode with Odo, who's actually a very down-to-earth guy, if you can say that on a spaceship. But to see how the series addresses these feelings and emotions, and at the same time, within the span of just a short episode, kind of brings that to closure and actually has a message for us as the viewers. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Can't wait to see where the series goes, and I'm so glad that I still have a couple of seasons left to enjoy, and I've never seen them. Nobody spoiled me, and please don't, because I really want to experience this as if I'm watching, and I am watching it for the first time. Can't wait to see how it all, where it all will lead.
Catholics rock!
As usual, it is time for a short visit to the Peculiar Bunch, aka the Catholics.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
And even though Catholics are a peculiar bunch from time to time, you may have questions. You may wonder why we do things that we do. So this is the place where I give you your answers.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
So today I would like to share with you not answers to a question, but 4 habits that help me every day to put my faith in practice. As I've often mentioned also in the walk, habits are super important. Your habits actually determine who you are and who you're going to be. It's not the big decisions. It's important from time to time to make a big decision, but it's ultimately the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, some stuff even on autopilot, what is going to determine your life and mold it to a certain extent. So here are 4 things that I had to acquire as habits, because habits, of course, are not like, if it was just intuition or autopilot right from the get-go, there would be no effort. But these are things that you can learn, that you can acquire as habits. So here are 4 things that I've learned and that I still have to practice, because habits, again, are just habits. You can also lose them, or you can replace them with bad habits. So, but let's start with prayer. Prayer, of course, obviously, is the way in which we as human beings, lost in the universe, in a galaxy that is so incredibly big, but prayer is our line with God. It's our communication line with God. When we pray, we open ourselves for the one who created all this and is able to find us, despite the fact that we're so tiny and so insignificant, because he is our Father. And a father or a mother will always find their children, even if they are in a huge crowd. Once the moment they see their child, they know that's my child. That's kind of how I equate that when it comes to God and my relationship with God. Even though, from an astronaut's point of view, the Earth is tiny and lost, but God is not looking with a telescope. He's looking for me with his heart. And so in order to nurture that relationship with God, prayer is the way. This is the way. But prayer, as you know from experience, is not always easy. Especially if you're new to prayer. And it's like, so how does that work? Do I say words? Of course, we know the prayers that have been written before us or have been taught to us, like the Our Father, taught to us by Jesus. But what about other forms of prayer? How do you do that? Do you just sit in a church and then you close your eyes and then God starts talking to you? No. and it's very difficult to give you a one fit, how do you say that? One size fits all recipe for prayer, because none of us are the same. We're all different. We have different sensitivities. Some of us are more visual, others are more verbal. Other people just need to move. You can pray by singing. You can pray by dancing. You can pray by walking and just being silent. And there is not one specific way of prayer. What is much more important than what you pray? Let me sneeze. Excuse me. More important than what you pray or how long you pray or what you say or whether you kneel or stand or you're laying on the ground or you walk in the woods. What is much more important is the habit of prayer. Creating moments during the day, if necessary, use habit stacking, which is if you find it difficult to find a moment during the day when to pray because your life is so hectic and you already have so much on your plate, don't try to make it into a burden. Connect it to something you automatically do. You don't even think about it. Like, I don't know, cleaning out the dishwasher. That could be a moment where while you're doing that, you take a few minutes to pray and you just connect with God and tell him, this is my day. I'm not looking forward to this, or I hope I'll get to talk to this and this person. Can you please bless my day? It can be as simple as that. Or when you are, when you're putting on your pajamas before you go to bed, while you're putting on your pajamas, instead of listening to the radio or to a podcast, just do it. Put on your pajamas in silence and say, I'm going to get ready for the night. Lord, can you watch over me? Can you give me new energy? Can you bless my day and everything that went wrong and what went well? Can you make it bear fruit? And that's it. Even if it only means that you're going to pray while you're putting on your pajamas, habit stacking will help you to turn it into a habit. And it's much more important. God has eternity. He doesn't count the number of minutes that you pray, or the number of words you use, or the number of prayers you recite. It's the quality of prayer that matters. It's this moment that you think of him. Just like in a relationship, it's not the amount of flowers that you give each other every week. No, it's these little moments of affection. It's like, how was your day? Tell me what, I can tell that you're upset. Would you like to share it with me? Can I do something for you? Little things. It could just be wrapping an arm around someone, giving someone a kiss, or with your children, just caress them for a moment. Tell them you love them. Simple things. That's what works in relationships. That's also what works in your relationship with God. So habit, turn it into a habit, and don't worry about, am I doing it right? Or do I pray enough or long enough or whatever? Second tip, if you go to church, if that's one of your habits, which I would recommend, of course, starting the week with by going to church and give some food to your soul. Allow yourself to start the week with something that has nothing to do with work or even with like all the other obligations. If you have a hard time in church because you think it's boring or it's not speaking to you, my advice, my tip would be seek one highlight. Try to find one thing, one takeaway, and think about that. Focus on that. It doesn't always have to be the words of the priest or the liturgy itself. It can also be the way the sun hits the stained glass windows and ensnares you with like the magical beauty of being in that church. It could be a moment of silence. It could be a beautiful piece of music that is played, or maybe an emotion that you feel, or it could also be, something that was said that touched you or that you could relate to. But pick one highlight and take that home. Then every time you go to church, there will be something in it for you. It's not just an obligation. It's not just a habit, but it's something that you found. It's like an Easter egg that you can take home, and that will feed you for the rest of the day and maybe even the week. In conjunction with that, reading the Bible, that's also something that, of course, is highly encouraged, but not always easy. If you listen to the Bible readings in church, maybe sometimes or maybe very often, it will go into one ear and will go out the other ear right away. I need to sneeze again. My apologies. That's you. This is just evening allergies. Don't worry about it. But it's usually when the heating kicks in. I've got pretty low temperatures here in the house. But in the evening, usually the heating will start to work, and then the dust in the air starts to swirl, and that's how I often have to sneeze when the room is heated. Anyway, so one golden tip that a priest once gave me when I was still in seminary was if you listen to a reading or you want to prepare for Sunday by reading in advance the readings of the week, pick one phrase or one word in that entire reading. Doesn't necessarily have to be the central element of that particular reading. What matters is that you, with your heart, try to connect with Scripture and find that one phrase that hits you, that makes you think about something, that inspires you, or makes you think about something else. I don't know. So there's always that one phrase that triggers you. If you read the Bible looking for that one word in that one phrase, you will find it. That's just how our brain works. It's how God programmed. Well, he didn't program us, but he gave us our brain because we're very good at connecting with patterns that we recognize. We are empathetic. So if we read a reading, there's always something that we can empathize with, that we can connect with, that will trigger something in our brain. Use that capacity that we have to find that one word that God maybe wants to tell you in that particular piece of God's word. And then my final tip, ask questions. Never stop asking questions. Never leave your brain at the entrance of a church. Being faithful, being a follower of Christ means asking questions. Jesus wants us to ask questions because he himself constantly asks his disciples, have you understood? Do you get it? Let me explain again. So you cannot acquire wisdom if you never ask questions. You cannot believe if you never doubt. So never think that, oh, but I have too many questions. There's so much in faith I don't understand. I must be a terrible Christian. I'm not worthy to call myself a Catholic or a Christian because, I have so many questions. I have so many doubts. I have so many commentary and criticism. that makes you a very good Catholic. That makes you a very good Christian, because asking questions is an expression of your desire to seek God and to seek the truth. If you stop seeking and looking for answers, you will find nothing. So God wants you to seek and wants you to ask the questions, even the difficult ones. Don't let anyone tell you, like, oh, that's a stupid question. Or, yeah, but you lack faith, because otherwise you wouldn't be questioning our faith. No. Fides querens intellectum. Faith seeks understanding. And the opposite is also true. The more you understand, the more you will realize that there is more than what we can measure and what we can prove. And sometimes from seeking knowledge and seeking truth, faith will emerge. And many scientists can attest to that. So never stop asking questions. And if you have any questions, you can always ask them to me. So I have something to talk about here on The Peculiar Bunch.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
All right, today I want to talk about a wonderful book that I just finished reading, and it's written by an astronaut, and it was so enjoyable. It is, the astronaut is called Chris Hadfield. He's been on, I think, 2 or 3 shuttle missions, but even when he wasn't in space, he was involved in in mission control of more than 100 space shuttle flights. He wrote the book An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, and that's kind of what it is. He talks about his experiences as an astronaut, about how you become an astronaut, which for me, as a child, I always dreamt about being an astronaut. And we had one astronaut in, back then he hadn't been to space yet, but I had a poster of the space shuttle above my bed. I'm not kidding you. So it was actually at the foot end of my bed against a wall, and it was a cutout poster of the I think of the Enterprise, Space Shuttle Enterprise, and showed you, like, you saw the space shuttle in 3D, and then some parts of it were open, so you could see the cockpit and the places where they would sleep. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be like Woobo Ockles. I was so surprised when I was watching For All Mankind, the Apple TV Plus series by Ronald D. Moore about this alternate reality or alternate history where Russia and the United States are still competing to get to the moon and then to get to Mars and whatnot. And one of the characters is Woobo Ockles. It's our own Woobo Ockles, but it's an alternate history. So it's not exactly the same guy. He does have a mustache, just like the real one. And so I've always been fascinated by space travel. And of course, I ended up in a totally different profession, and I doubt that I would have ever made it to become an astronaut, because you have to be actually more of a scientist type of guy. I was more into language and reading and history and the creative part. I was not good at math or physics or anything, or chemistry, so not a good match. But I could keep dreaming, and this book was so wonderful because it's really a peek inside the life of astronauts, and including the stuff that you never hear about. And he mentions it. People often have a very romanticized idea of what it is, what life is as an astronaut. And he said he too initially had those same romantic ideas, and then of course reality is very different. And but he a lot of the stuff that he explains about what kind of mindset do you need as an astronaut. For instance, like sweat the small stuff, because every little error can kill you. Think ahead. What is the next thing that will kill me? That kind of hypervigilance that is so incredibly important in the training. And then he explains how that actually came in handy later on when there were problems during one of those missions. It was wonderful. Also, just some mundane stuff. How do you sleep? in space? How do you brush your teeth? And what happens when it's warm and you're sweating in your suit? And oh my gosh! At one time, when he was still a pilot, because he became an astronaut after having been a pilot, which is not that used to be like the ideal career switch, but no longer that is the case because a lot of modern day astronauts are just scientists. But he said that one day he was in an airplane with someone else, and then there is a snake. There is a black snake in his cockpit, and he opens the window of his airplane to throw the snake out. And it's like that. But keeping his cool in situations like that is part of the training you get as an astronaut. Another thing that I really appreciated, and for me, one of the important takeaways of this book has nothing to do with the life of an astronaut, but what he explains, a lot of people tend to ask him, so do you miss space? Because he's been in the space station for a very long time, several months, I think. And then people always talk about it as if that was the only highlight of his life. Whereas because he works for NASA, like 80-90% of his work has always been on planet Earth in helping other astronauts and helping NASA in their space exploration. But it's not in space. It's not exciting. And then he says, the older I get, the last time I was in space, I knew it was my last time. I would never return to the space station. I would never fly in a space shuttle again. But I refuse to measure the success of my life only based on those highlights. I try to live my life every day, investing in what I have to do this very day and finding my pride and finding my joy in what life throws at me today. And if I wouldn't do that, then I would live a life of regret. Because there's nothing that's ever going to top me being in space. But I'm too old for that now. I'm retired. And so I keep challenging myself and trying to find, okay, so how can I apply what I've learned as an astronaut to my day-to-day stuff? And then just enjoy it. And the small things are just as important as the big things. And so it's this kind of this quality of, or this virtue, I would call it, of contentment that, according to him, is so important. And it's something you learn if you work for NASA. Because not everybody gets to fly in space. Even if you trained for years and years and years, but you end up on the replacement crew, the just-in-case crew, and you never actually get to fly in a space shuttle or to be in space, it's still, that's when you have to just love what you do, even if it doesn't include space. If you don't live your life that way, you're going to be sad all the time. I thought it was a really great lesson. And so a very good read. Again, it's called Chris Hadfield, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Let's take a quick look at the kitchen. And right now, if you would open my fridge, there's one thing that has always been part of my fridge, and it's no longer there. It's a staple ingredient. Most of you will have it in your fridge as well. I no longer have it. It's dairy. I don't have any dairy anymore. And I replaced all my dairy, like the milk and the yogurt, I replace it all by soy-based products right now. I tried out other stuff like coconut-based stuff and what is it? You've got the oatmeal juice or whatever. Anyway, soy, I think, works the best. It's got really good protein content. And if you look at the sustainability of soy-based dairy-like products or dairy replacements, it's a lot better for the environment. And no cow will have to suffer for my yogurt. And actually, the quality nowadays is pretty good. It took some getting used to, and I had to try out various brands to see which one I like the best. So I still don't like to drink like what is it, soy milk or soy drink or whatever it's called. That's a little bit weird. But if you, for instance, now I have discovered that Lidl has soy-based chocolate milk, and it's so good. Oh my gosh. I put it in the microwave so it's nice and hot. And when I get back from running outside and it's cold, I have my little soy chocolate milk, and it's so good. I add some soy-based topping, which is kind of what used to be whipped cream. I don't taste the difference. It's so good. And like, wow, this is all plant-based. How far have we come? Now, the thing is, what is so interesting is that, of course, this is not only good for our environment, but it's also much more sustainable for our economy. I don't know how the situation is in your country, but here in the Netherlands, especially meat and dairy have seen incredible price hikes lately. It's the stuff that next to gasoline, so fuel and energy, the thing that has seen the biggest price raises. How do you say that? It's the thing that got the most expensive. How do you say that? Inflation. It's mostly because dairy and meat have become so expensive, and it used to be that these alternatives, meat alternatives, dairy alternatives, were a lot more expensive than meat and milk, which is kind of weird because, raising cows and stuff, it's a very intensive, expensive process. And yet dairy was highly subsidized in my country. And so it was always cheaper than plant-based stuff. No longer is that the case. So the soy-based products are a lot cheaper now than actual dairy. And I have to say, taste-wise, I don't have a problem with that anymore. Now, the supermarkets are trying to promote that, and they do that by using a technique called nudging. Nudging is kind of subconscious, what it says, nudging you to choose those replacements. And I read an article this morning on a tech site explaining how they use technology to do that, and by measuring people. But for instance, a lot of supermarkets have scanners. You scan your own groceries and then you can instantly pay. You don't have to wait in line anymore. But a lot of people use an app for that on their phone, or for instance, to get like extra percentage off or something like that. In the app, they can nudge you. So for instance, if you scan like a Coca-Cola with sugar, they can give you a message and say, hey, did you know that there's actually a sugar-free alternative, Coke, Diet Coke, or whatever it's called? I don't drink Coca-Cola. And then they tried out various things. There was for some people, they would add even why it is healthier, because sugar is bad for you and this will blah, blah, blah. Or they would use visual cues like a smiley or a heart. Like this is the friendly, nice alternative to sugar-based or dairy-based or meat-based products. Turns out that that research showed that the biggest change was when the alternative was presented when people were faced with a very specific choice. So what they did, for instance, and that all the other nudging was actually counterproductive. So if you would explain, but vegan meat is actually much better for the environment and the cows won't have to suffer, that is just making people like, yeah, okay, well, because you keep telling me that, I will go for the meat. We don't like being talked down to. But if you just say, hey, did you know actually that there's an alternative? People will, a huge percentage of people will actually pick the alternative if they know that there is an alternative. And so in the supermarkets, you can see that this is changing the way they organize the supermarket. The alternatives for dairy and meat used to be in a totally different part of the supermarket. Now, in most supermarkets here in the Netherlands, it's next to the meat or next to the milk and the cheese. So there is like an entire column right next to the dairy and the cheese with vegan dairy and vegan cheese, soy-based products. And I've noticed myself that I see that, wait a minute. So this yogurt, dairy-based, is $1.30. And that soy-based yogurt is $1.60. That's only 30 cents. And you know, it's much better for the environment. Let me pick that. It's a no-brainer. And I've noticed that with the meat at the Lidl, they do that as well. The meat alternatives are next to the chicken. I think that they should also do it next to the beef, but it's already good that it's in the same aisle, you know, because you see it when you are trying to pick, what am I going to eat tonight? Oh, but I could just as well just take the fake soy chicken pieces or whatever, because last time I sampled those, they were actually really nice. So this is the signs of nudging. It's like hinting us and trying to influence our behavior without us noticing. I think it's fascinating.
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Just plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build,
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
Yeah, technology. Gosh, I'm already reading about the latest rumors of the iPhone 15. The 14 just came out. Apparently, the iPhone 15 is going to have like a periscope camera. And I saw a very interesting video explaining why it will probably take some more time for Apple to get their photos on the same level as, for instance, Samsung. It has to do with the fact that a lot of the photos that we take, and even video, is not just dependent, the quality does not just depend on the sensor or the quality of the lens, even though that's usually what Apple and Samsung tend to stress during their presentations. But it's not the new sensor or the new lens that's going to automatically result in better photos. In fact, with Apple, with the iPhone 14, a lot of the photos are subpar when you compare them to what other phones are able to produce. Like, for instance, the new Pixel 7, Google is much more reliably putting out like results that are superior to what Apple does. And MKHB explains that that's because of software. If you use the same lens and the same sensor for a couple of years, the software makers or programmers can optimize their software to work with that specific lens and plus sensor combination. Now that Apple has made the switch to a much, much bigger sensor and better lenses, the software is still interpreting the data that comes from all this new hardware as if it was the slightly subpar hardware from last year. And this is why some of these photos look a bit over-sharpened. And he predicts that for the iPhone 15, Apple will probably make huge leaps in image quality, and they will, of course, give it a new name to tell you that that's absolutely because of the new iPhone 15, but it's all software. They can also, in retrograde, do that for the iPhone 14 and even iPhone 13 probably. So it's going to be interesting to see if Apple will continue to improve this whole computational side of making images. And I'm currently still on the fence. Like, do I get an iPhone now, or am I going to wait one more season to get the one where they switch to USB-C? Because of data transfer speeds, that's pretty lousy if you use the Lightning connector. So on my iPad, I have USB-C, very, very high speed, and I don't think I can go back to the slow speeds of the Lightning connector. Plus, I'm still very curious about the software improvements now that Apple has very good hardware in their phones. Only time will tell, I guess. And with that, I need to wrap up because I need to go to the restaurant where I'm going to meet Father Henry and Father Eric, as well as the members of the parish council for the Last Supper. That sounds a bit ominous, the Last Supper, but no, I just enjoy these last moments with Father Henry here as the pastor of the parish, and also looking forward to a nice meal I don't have to cook tonight. I'll leave you with a quote of the week, as was the case last week. It's some Japanese wisdom that I want to share with you, and this is a Japanese principle called Gammon, Gaman, and it's explained as preserving your dignity during tough times. I like that idea. Even no matter how tough the times are, how much you are under stress or duress, preserve your dignity. Rise above it. Keep your calm. Tell yourself, doesn't help if I get angry, if I blame others or blame myself or whatever. Let's live out my dignity. Let's take it as it is and try to work with it. Because this is my life. And this is what I've been given. So let's make the most of that. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening. God bless. All right, it was great talking to you. I apologize that I have to run right away because I've got to be at the restaurant in 10 minutes, and it's in 9 minutes, and it's a 50-minute ride on my bike. So I'll read the comments later on. Thank you for participating in the stream, and I will see you soon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for the next time I'm going to be live. Now, where is my StreamYard? Because I need to turn off the stream. There it is. All right. Have a good one.